welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast. And I'm really excited today to have my next guest, Melody Askari. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. And I know you as Mel, so we'll just stick with that. Keep it casual, keep it cool. And Mel is a Chief Customer Officer at NIICO. She's an accomplished professional whose dynamic career lies in the intersection of education and technology. She works for NIICO, which is an intelligent automation startup, where she's growing and leading a team of post-sales function. Recently, she was a director of business and digital consulting at Qantas, where she addresses the technology needs of the higher education sector. I can go on, but your CV is extremely impressive, and congratulations on your promotion to CCO, Chief Customer Officer. I think it's a great accomplishment, sort of like stacks up your years of experience, but amazing. So if I was just to ask in layman terms, what do you actually do as a Chief Customer Officer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, and one that we all grapple with. Chief customer officer roles are relatively new in industry, so it is an evolving space. But fundamentally, me and my teams, we look after all of the post-sales functions. So in the context that I work in, which is technology, once we have had a contract, so the customer signed on the dotted line, it basically gets handed over to my team, and that's to make sure that our customers are onboarded properly so they understand what the next 3, 6, 12, 2, 10 years looks like. We then work with them to implement the product. So in my case, I work with the teams my teams work with our clients to implement automation. We then provide the maintenance and the support and the education services in and around that, and the customer success function, which is really an evolution of that sort of account management role, isn't it? And now it's an account management plus. So it's really about holding our clients' hands and making sure that they are using our product as much as they can, to make sure they're getting as much value out of it as they can. So it's a really interesting space to operate in, and it works really closely with the sales function as well. You need to, and we've developed a really nice methodology here where we also interact with the sales piece. So we know what's coming, we understand what's being sold, and the sales team are clear about what the onboarding and the implementation and the sort of post-sales piece looks like as well. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting, engaging role to be in. I'm excited to continue growing those teams,
Yeah, and you talked about automation and, once a product has been established and teaching the teams how to use it. What I've noticed a lot with a lot of the technology tools that are coming up in the market is there's a lot of the teams having to go through universities of how to use the tool, getting themselves to certain stages. So there's a lot of learning as you go. But I think those first steps of having an organization such as yourself handhold in a way and say, this is what you need to do, this is how it works, these are the flows, these are the things you need to be aware of, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an interesting area that we operate in because we're in sort of what we consider to be emerging technologies. We're in intelligent automation, and I often joke, but there was before ChatGPT and then there was after ChatGPT. One day we all woke up and suddenly this incredible technology was there supporting our sort of day-to-day lives, and yet the morning before most of us didn't really even know it existed, right? So our job, our role, our sort of professional role, is to take these emerging technologies as they become part of our a popular lexicon and understanding, and then create user cases. Create scenarios where actually you as a customer, or you as an institution, or you as an organization can use that. So how do we translate ChatGPT into something usable, and then help our clients and our customers to understand what that value is for them? And sometimes there are things that are not valuable, and we think, well, actually, this is not the right tool for the job, and that's part of our role, both in the sales piece and in the sort of customer success piece, is to say, well, actually, I don't think this is great, but actually, this technology would actually be a much better fit to solve the challenge that you're encountering at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting being at the edge of it. We are learning as everyone else is learning. We're, a couple of steps ahead. But it's exciting, and it keeps the team, on their toes a little bit. It keeps me on my toes a little bit. The team are great though.
Yeah, I think so, especially since we know, I think one of the biggest things, talk to my teams in the e-commerce world, is they're just saying, if this can save us time and admin,
Yeah.
anything we can automate to answer all those questions that we nagging C-suite always ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll be sitting in our board meetings, looking at the pack and saying, I think we need more information. And you go back to the teams, they're having to manually data mine and
Yeah.
pull things together. But if we can, automate as much as possible, then that just helps as well. And the AI is always learning. So I
Exactly.
think that's the important thing. It's scary, but it's
Yeah.
important as well to have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we work with a number of different sectors, and they're at different levels of maturity in their understanding and use of intelligent automation. So, for example, in the HE sector, which is my sort of background, we're really getting on with the sort of RPA piece, which is exactly as you say. It's that making sure that the data is being moved from one place to another, that we're automating operational processes so that they're done in 30 seconds and not 10 minutes, or easing the pressure so we don't need to bring in temporary staff to do a particular activity. For example, enrolment activities at universities, you can imagine, are very condensed, very high intensity, high staff, activities. So if we can use an automation to lower that burden, then that means that those staff can maybe attend to those slightly more tricky, challenging situations, or the students or the applicants who need a slightly different, more tailored approach to navigating their university experience. So there's lots of staff and student value add, but actually then, as you say, from the sort of C-suite, who are like, well, why is it taking this long? We need to improve our numbers. We have a growth strategy. Actually, automation is such a great tool to help support those much bigger conversations about how do we grow, how do we maintain, how do we make sure that we, put our stake in the ground as a organization or as an institution. So it's a really interesting tool in that sense. And then, as you say, AI is always learning, right? So we do a lot of sentiment analysis. We work with a lot of OCR readers, and they learn. And they're telling me, what grade this this essay should have, and they're saying, in the AI sort of saying, do you agree? And you're sort of saying, yeah, I do actually. You're almost spot on. What it isn't doing is doing it, and then sending the grades out. But what it is doing is doing some of the heavy lifting for you, and then allowing you to then make the decision. So you're still doing that sort of human in the loop piece, but it's just taking that really heavy lifting. If you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assessments, actually it's just churning through them, giving you a bit of a confidence rating on each one, and then you'll say, oh yeah, I agree, I think this is exactly the right grade, or actually this needs a tweak. But then it learns, and then the next time it's better and it's more clever. So it's really interesting technology. It is slightly terrifying, but it's really interesting.
Yeah. So Mel, you've just explained an amazing role, lots of scope, lots to do within your particular sector. So that's great. This job is not going away, this job role. Let's talk about your background. Who is Mel and how this all started? At what point did you then say, this is actually a sector I'd love to get into?
Yeah.
But also, who are you? Where are you from? I know you a bit, but, just for the audience.
So I'm a first generation Iranian. So my mum and dad, they came over in the mid 70s to study, as did a lot of Iranians in the mid 70s when movement between Iran and the world was open and safe and secular. But of course, then the revolution happened, and for lots and lots of reasons, my parents didn't feel they're able to go home. And actually, quite, a lot of the diaspora have exactly the same experience. And if you reach out there and look at my parents' generation of Iranians, they will almost all have exactly the same story. That they came to study but weren't able to go back. So, in that sense, it was interesting growing up in that sort of in that diaspora. There was always this fine line between treading your cultural, engaging with your cultural heritage, and it was something that the community really held on to because we didn't have an awful lot else. but also wanting to fit in because, of course, I was born in Huddersfield. I grew up in England. My schooling is English. My second language is English. And so it was quite an interesting. It was quite an interesting sort of growing up period. Language is really important here, and I talk about language quite a lot when I talk about my history, and also about how you as a woman or a minority woman or any woman in tech or anybody who wants to get into technology, language is such an important thing to understand. So when I sort of hit my teens and was heading into university, I didn't have the language for graduate. I didn't know what a graduate scheme was. Like, I didn't understand what that was. I didn't understand terms like the Big Four. I didn't understand what it meant to be picked, to go on to these schemes in one of those Big Four. I didn't, all of that sort of what we now understand to be a bit of a slipstream, right? It's a bit of a slipstream to successful careers, lucrative careers quite often, important careers, perceived important careers. I didn't have that language. So, I sort of came out of university and I just got a job. I got the first job that somebody would give me. And I did some more study. And then I moved into higher education, really because I lived in Milton Keynes and the Open University at the time was a massive employer. And it just seemed like it was just a logical job, it was a job opening I went for.
Ties in with the cultural aspect as well. I can so relate, isn't it? Is get an education, get a job, build self-sufficient, support the family if you can, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it was exactly that.
Yeah.
I very, very early on, it's like, get a job. You don't have time to go for a gap year. Gap years are not for people like us. You don't have time to explore who you are. No time for this. You need a mortgage and you need a job, and they both sort of happened really quickly in my very early 20s. And there is a lot of pressure there, and then all the other pressures that come with not being, that come with your sort of cultural heritage as well. And education was always such an important theme. It was almost a bit predestined that I would spend my entire life in and around education in the end. I never quite escaped it despite my best efforts. But the transition to technology was lengthy, right? I mean, I don't have that beautiful career where I interned at Google and and then got headhunted by Netflix, or worked for Spotify and got jet setted around the world. That's not what my career trajectories look like. It's been hard and it's been slow, and for lots of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into later about sort of challenges. It's taken its time, and at the time I was very impatient. I kept thinking, I can do more than this. I need more than this. This is not the end for me. This is just the beginning. Why isn't it going faster? But actually, in hindsight, the time, the operational roles, the not so great pay has put me in such good stead then for these roles, because I have been frontline staff for a very long time. I've managed frontline teams for a really long time. I've worked with all of the technologies that I now help to plug gaps in. I've worked with them all, so I know what these technologies look and feel like, and I know the burden that they incur in operational teams. So actually, whilst the trajectory has not been fast, and I'm talking 20 years in the making, it couldn't have been any other way, I don't think, because I wouldn't have brought that level of depth of expertise and understanding about my very niche, admittedly, sector to the table. So it's been really interesting. But language has been such a theme all the way through. I didn't have the language to understand what those grad schemes were. I didn't have the language of technology for a very long time. And then when I was thrust into it, I had to learn that language really quickly. And then I didn't have the language to communicate with C-suite, let alone then operate at C-suite. So at every stage, there is this theme about learning the language that you are speaking. You need to understand what people are saying to you, and you need to be able to articulate that back to your clients, to your peers, to your leaders as well. So it's been an interesting journey.
I'm just looking at your LinkedIn and all the things that you've done, and 20 years, girl, Be proud of your achievements. I mean, you've had exactly what is known as lived experience.
Yeah.
It feels like you've been solving lots of problems. So,
Yeah.
which is, you know, in the technology sector, problem solving is a very big skill set to have. You talked about being thrust into the technology. At what point did you actually know, oh, actually, this is what I'm doing? This is actually
Yeah.
where I'm now in that technology space. At what
Yeah.
point did that
Yeah.
happen?
It's a good question. So I had an opportunity to work with a private institution for a period of time, and they just bought a piece of technology that they wanted somebody to implement, somebody in the team to implement, And I sort of put my hand up and said, "Oh, I can do that." Partly because I knew what that software needed to do. Because in my previous roles, I'd actually used those systems all the time, so I knew what that particular piece of software needed to do. But I'd never had any sort of implementation experience at all. Um, and
Google
I think,
how to implement. You were on Google how to
I mean,
implement,
I
how to
literally,
project manage.
don't we all feel frantically Google things at 2 a.m? How do I? Or is there
Template.
a template? Yeah. So
How do I
no.
adapt this template
Yeah,
to my
yeah,
current organization? There you go. That's
exactly.
Trailblazer tip number one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Google
Yeah,
everything, template. There are templates for everything out
yeah.
there. Go for it. So yeah, there was a lot of sort of frantic Googling, but I loved it. I found that actually what it did is it played to my key strengths, which was to problem solve, to find solutions. I had spent about 15, well, at least a decade being really frustrated with the software I was using. So here was my opportunity to build something that didn't have those challenges. I could apply my own frustrations to building this new product. And then in that time, I learned that actually I really liked working with people. I really liked solving problems. I really liked working with a product that could develop and morph and evolve and solve other people's pain points. I liked that. I liked being able to help other people go, oh, I don't need to do that 67-point workaround anymore because it just does it for me. That's amazing, you know. Um, so that's how I sort of realized, oh, technology is where I want to go. And then I had to find a job. I wasn't headhunted into a nice consultancy role. I wasn't asked to come in to do an advisory. I looked for a role that was working with a student information system in one of the big vendors. I applied and I went through a interview process. I often hear stories where people are like, oh, and then I moved into. I'm like, well, how did you move into that? Did somebody just pick you up and like, how did you get there? I had to work really hard. I had rejections and thanks but no thanks, and got to the final stages. And actually, it was Unit 4 that finally offered me a post. I fit their needs, and they fit mine. So that's how I sort of transitioned over into technology. But it was, a consultancy role. Again, I wasn't heading into anything super senior. Every step of the way, it's been, a real a real evolution of knowledge and learning.
And you talk a lot about the challenges or problems that are in higher education. So, what are the biggest problems that having worked with various technology and the stresses
Yeah,
around it, what are the
yeah.
biggest things that you've been trying to solve?
Yeah, it's real. I mean, for the last sort of 6-7 years, really the lens through which I've been working with HE has been technology and digital and data. So they're the bits that I sort of focus on. It's been an interesting time for HE. There has been a lot of, and I suspect this is the same for lots of other sort of public, private sector organisations, but there is a lot of legacy technology. So a lot of technology that people bought in the mid-90s that was desktop-based, that has been very heavily customised to suit ever more protracted processes, and ever more protracted data requirements. And that has caused problems when you want to migrate things to the cloud or you want to tidy things up. So all of that journey is really, really difficult. And then you think about the layout of an institution where you might have a very devolved department set up. So each department has its own budget for technology, and all of a sudden you have 16 instances of Salesforce, all doing their own thing. You have no central source of data. You have no way to report on that data. It's really, so then when your C-suite or your exec is like, can I just get a sense of progression across all these different schools? It's really hard to bring that information to life. And even if you pull it out of what you think is a central source, the numbers are not right, so it's that sort of landscape is where we're working. So a lot of institutions have embarked on very big transformation projects, and again, this is not restricted to higher education. Lots of organizations have had to embark on transformation programs, but it's hard to do that when you are also administering sometimes 30,000-40,000 students in a live environment, with the operational requirements that come with that, and a growth strategy, and the fact that you don't have enough staff because you don't really pay market levels of salary, those sorts of challenges. So interestingly, one of the reasons NIICO, the intelligent automation arm, was born out of Equantis, which was a sort of evolution of my job role, was to service that, was because actually lots of institutions don't have time or the money or the means to rip out their legacy technology. And actually for the next 3 to 5 years, they need something to help plug the gaps. They need something that takes data from here and puts it there, or tidies that data up so they can do that regulatory return, or gives you a bit of an early indicator that your students are not doing so well, so you can intervene. There's lots of that happening in the sort of intelligent automation space, so that they can put into place those other bits to then do those big transformation programs a little bit later on. So, yeah.
I always think about the Mac architecture that comes to mind, because I wish so many businesses would just, go into that. And for those who don't know, Mac is a set of technology principles, microservice based, API, cloud native, headless.
Yeah.
And I was talking to, I was on an event where she's amazing. She works for Puma. And she was talking about how they just embarked on a few years ago. We are just going to revolutionize and just improve, future proof our technology. Mm-hmm. And it was really about, they said, we're going to just move to Mac, headless, and we're going to create the foundation that will allow us, to your point, to plug in, update seamlessly, knowing that it was going to take time, but it was a commitment that they just said, this is what we're going to do. It's part of our growth strategy. Yeah. And if you think about universities, I did my distance learning, and when I log on to the portal, which is, bless them, it's the most archaic. It's not.
Yes, it's not ever time.
Yeah, and nothing's really connected, and there's an app, but it's not that great when you're researching. So I can imagine the admin side of them managing students and, the facility. There's a lot going on. So the fact that you've come out of this having lived through all the challenges, but I think you were also curious, Mel. You're curious, like you said, about why are we, having to 60 ways to skin a cat, when actually, we could have a better way of doing it and make life easier for everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. It's definitely a personality trait. I'm very much path of least resistance. Like, why would we do it? Why is it so difficult when we could just make it so much easier? It's always about what's easy, what's the easiest way to do this, and that's the thing that we do.
Yeah. Let's talk about achievements, because we need to be bigging you up on this podcast. You've talked about, honestly, your path, because you said, you didn't have the traditional path of, I know people as well have had that path. They've become a management consultant, and that suddenly has opened up the door to this, or they applied to the Big Four, or they did a gap year working at this company. And I've also had a similar path to yours. Well, it's about growth in the ranks, which I think we need to normalize. That's okay too. It's okay, and you can still get to where you're going if you're curious, hardworking. You might not want to do the sexy jobs at the beginning, but it will lead to them in the end. I think we need to get a generation that is, it's okay to start, at the bases, and maybe you have to work in the city or the town where you're in for that moment, and then relocate, move. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? And I think social media really exacerbates this idea, not only in terms of like your professional career, but everybody on social media is a millionaire. Everybody on social media is in Dubai. Everybody is living their best lives, and actually, that's a very, very small proportion of people, very tiny proportion of people. And it's a very tiny proportion of people who do have that slipstream or do have the connections or do have the family, the family member who owns the tech company or owns the construction company or owns the whatever and steps you in somewhere. Actually, for lots of people, and, especially for women who are not white, there are so many invisible barriers that I didn't recognize as I was migrating through my career. I didn't even know what to look out for. They're so ingrained into the fabric of business that you can't even recognize it. And when you do, it's blatantly obvious and it's shut down. But that's rare, actually. But there are all these sort of micro moments where I probably should have been given a promotion. I probably should have been moved into another role or another, and I just wasn't. And you don't recognize it. You don't recognize that that's what's going on. Um, but most people's careers are like this. Most people I know have had careers where they've just found a job after school, after university, and have grafted. And some of the careers are quicker and some of them are slower. But one of the things I think I've really learned is that you can't compare yourself to anybody else's journey. You can't, because you don't know. You see what you see out there, what people put on their LinkedIn. I'm delighted to, and I'll probably have a couple of more of those in my career, delighted to say that I've got this job or that job. But actually, you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors and what that journey actually looks like. So yeah, it's definitely something that I'm very aware of, is that, or normalizing the
Yeah.
career pathway.
And did you find that in your early years, so for me, early years are like your 20s and so on, where when you look back now, I feel like those years were all about establishing resilience, consistency, hard work, being willing to learn whatever
Yeah.
job you're in, because those are the traits that, when you get into a C-suite role, or if you've suddenly moved into another sector, it's the transferable skills that they're looking for. They're not specifically saying, well, in job X, Y, and Z, this is exactly what they're looking at: transferable
Yes.
skills that can be, used in other areas, and that you build over time.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a period in my early mid-20s where actually I was just learning how to be an adult because I'd had a very sheltered upbringing that was, culturally very different to the real world out here in the UK. So there was a period of time where I was just figuring out who I was. And, and some people know that. I mean, we work, you and I both know people that are in their early 20s and very much know who they are and very much know where they're going. And that's incredible. I was not one of those people. I had some work to do there. Uh, but you're right. That professionally, what I spent my time doing there was learning those transfer, understanding what good management and good leadership look like. Also, because I had both good and bad managers and good and bad leaders, so you start to get a sense of, oh, I thrived under this methodology, but I really didn't enjoy being managed in this way. So I wouldn't do that to my team. So you learn that. And you're right, you also learn those other transferable skills. And some of that's about language. Some of that's about then being able to communicate effectively, understanding what makes something good versus what makes something not so great. So there was lots of that in my 20s. And then in my 30s, and I'm sure you were the same, you start to sharpen those skills a little bit, and then you start to sort of hone in a little bit on your own interests and your own sort of skill set, okay, and you start to build on those, and then you sort of head onwards into those sort of not later years of your career, the prime of your career, and hopefully you've got those two skills in your pocket, those two sort of sets of skills in your pocket, and then you're flying. Then that's been my experience, really.
Yeah, big lesson for me was delegating and hiring people who are better than you. That was a game changer.
Oh my God, I love that. I mean, it was on my list. It's been on my list of like, my biggest lessons learned is
Yeah,
my role as a leader is to empower, engage, facilitate, safeguard, but enable my team who are all
yeah,
going to be experts in the area that I am not. My job is just to I'm the grease in between, that just makes sure that
WD-40, that's what
that
you
I
are.
am literally the WD-40 for my team. So, because I trust them. They're brilliant. Like, I've got amazing teams of developers that do some really complex, or, build really complex automations in really challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
And I've business analysts who can take the most convoluted process and chop it down and, break it down and go, this is what they're doing, this is what they should be doing, and this is the automation we're going to. I mean, that's a skill set I don't have, and I will happily tell them I don't have this, but I will make sure that you have the space to do this properly. And if you have a problem, you come to me, and we will figure out how to solve it together. And that's my role in this context. Delegation is key to this activity.
Game changer. Talk to me
Absolutely.
about things that you're proud of professionally, your biggest achievements or achievement so far to date.
Yeah, I mean, my entire career feels like I'm really proud of my entire career, really. Every single role that I was offered, every single role that I excelled in, even the challenges, even the not so great bits were all learning experiences. And that was one of my other, really big takeaways. All steps are forward. Even if the step feels like it's backward, it's still forward, because what it does is it teaches you what you don't want or what you're not willing to tolerate. So, I'm sort of proud of my professional career. I've made that sort of mythical, magical C-suite, that sort of C-suite role. And I didn't think I would necessarily get here. That wasn't ever an aim of mine. It wasn't something that I was ever told I could obtain as a woman, or, it was not something that was considered part of my career path. So in that sense, I'm super proud. But so individually in those areas, I've also done great work. I've made great friends. I've delivered great projects. I've solved big problems. I've created technology strategies that entire institutions are now using to define the next sort of 10 years of their technology roadmaps. I mean, that's amazing for someone who, whose English is a second language and took quite a while to find themselves and a career path. And I guess the third thing is really, I'm proud of how resilient I am, because actually some of these roles are difficult, and you will also have had experience of this, right? There are roles and you just think, oh, this might break me. Actually, this is hard. But being able to put into place those measures to keep yourself safe, that is something that not everybody can do, or not everybody knows how to do. So actually being able to do that, being able to say no, stop. Actually, I'm quite proud of the fact that I can do those things, because it's not easy. It's not easy to go to your boss and say, I'm struggling. It's not easy to go to somebody and say, this is not acceptable. I'm not willing to accept this. Or I can't do this. That's the other thing. I'm quite proud of the fact that if I don't know how to do something, I don't know how to do this. And I'll go find it, frantic 2 a.m. Googling, right? Or phoning a friend, or
Asking, yeah.
asking
For help
somebody.
is a strength, actually.
Yeah, it is. All of these things are strengths. The narrative about sort of, and I have a lot of very successful business friends. And this narrative, that success and being proud of your accomplishments is, oh, I've closed that £1 million deal, or we did this really big thing, or we've done this massive go live. Actually, for me, the things I'm most proud of is my own growth. Like that's it. Because if I think back to me at 50, I struggled at school, didn't have a great time. I struggled at university because, I wasn't ready for university, but didn't really have any choice but to go. So the fact that I'm not here, the fact that I'm here and not somewhere where I'm not allowed to leave the room without,
Is an accomplishment in itself.
is an
Yeah.
accomplishment in itself.
Yeah. Let's talk to me about your challenges, because obviously you're a woman, you're a woman of Iranian heritage. Talk to
Yeah.
me about some of the challenges you've experienced as a woman.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it's important for us to share that and be vulnerable is to inspire, some young girl out there, some lady out there who's going through the same thing, and just to show,
Yeah.
what, these things have happened, and but it's made me stronger. And, we are here as well. We've had a lot of guests appear on the show, and afterwards, some people have contacted them personally, DM, to say, I'd really like to talk to you because I relate. And how did you go through this? So what challenges have you experienced as a woman? Because it makes it real.
Yeah, it's a really good, and it's a question I ponder on quite a lot. And I think I've touched on a few of these in short earlier, but certainly the unseen bias has
Mm.
been really difficult, and it's a bit of an insidious one because you can't see it because and actually in my young years I didn't even really know that it existed because nobody was saying I'm not giving you this job because you're a woman and you're not the right skin color. Nobody says that. People say, "Oh, you don't have quite the right skills," and I'm like, why don't I have the right
Yeah,
skills?
that's the
Why?
word that they will use. And then
Yeah,
also certain, have you not noticed that, like you said, we know a lot of C-suite women, and we're suddenly now going into rooms that I didn't even know existed, or
yeah,
invited to meetings that we didn't know existed.
yes,
And the one thing I noticed when I'm in that room, I am the only person who looks like me. And I sort of think, but where are the others? Where is
yeah,
Mel in this,
yeah,
conversation? Where is
yeah.
so and so in this conversation? But I didn't even know that such things
No,
existed.
again, I mean, I say language. It's a very broad thing, but this language of business, you don't know. I
Yes,
had
that
an
they don't
opportunity.
teach you. Yeah.
No, they don't teach you. And I didn't know it existed until actually. I was given an opportunity to step into a bit of a chief of staff role at Unit 4 just for a very small period of time. Um, and then suddenly I was thrust as an observer really into this entire tier of business life that I just people talk about the private smoking rooms and the
Yeah.
private clubs and the private jets and we're meeting at Jennifer Lopez's house to talk business, that sort of, because she's hiring it out. I don't know. But I have no, I don't access that stuff.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And
That's
that's
what.
where the reason why we're mentioning it is not because we're saying we want to get into Jennifer Lopez's house. I mean, that would be nice.
It'll
But
be nice.
the reason the reason why we're saying it is because that those are where the decisions are being made
Yes,
about which women are going to be potentially put into certain roles, which
yes,
unfortunately
yes.
just by sending your job application you are not going to get into those roles. It's
No.
just a fact.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's a real challenge, which leads me to my sort of second, that second thing is, um, I didn't, I didn't always have someone to advocate for me, and I know I'm quite senior now, but I still need someone to, and I advocate for anybody that's in my team or anybody that's in my peer group or my mates, whatever. I will be your fiercest defender, and I will go out there on the front line. Um, but I didn't always have an ally, and sometimes I had the active opposite, and that's a real big challenge to navigate. It's easier as you get older. I think you're better at knowing what you will and won't tolerate, and then you're
Mm.
you're you're braver at speaking out and going, "This is inappropriate. I'm not willing to deal with this. So get it sorted." But actually, in my 20s, I didn't I didn't feel strong enough to say, actually, this is inappropriate, or, this is not working for me, or nobody's advocating for me in this space. So I'm on my own here in this relatively sort of junior, disempowered position. So that was definitely something that I grapple with. But interestingly, that has informed how I lead very much because I didn't have that consistently. I make sure that my team always feel like I am there as an ally, that I am there as that I am their professional person. If there is any problem, any issue, there is a proper open door policy, and they come to me and they tell me this or they tell me that or they tell me there's a professional problem or there's a personal thing going on. That stuff is so important. I guess the third thing was really around, well, a couple of things actually. And I don't know if you experience this. I feel like I spent, and actually to a point, to an extent now, I feel like I have to work twice as hard to prove my worth.
Mm.
And then there is an expectation that the level of output is just my work output, and not the fact that I'm just working myself half to death. So there was this. Do you know what I mean? I saw other people not working as hard and getting ahead, and me working doubly as hard. And then they're like, "Oh, you're too valuable in the role that you are. You're too good at what you do. I'm not going to let you be promoted or let you move on." And I don't think I ever found a solution. I don't think I found a solution to that challenge, really. I don't know if your experience has been the same and if you found any way to sort of navigate it. I'd love to know.
Yeah, I mean, God, I wish I had the magic bullet, but it is relatable because so I'm the oldest of eight, and we are in total six girls, two boys. And my mom and my dad always said they just broke it out really because they've grown up in the age of colonialism, segregation. There was a point when my dad was growing up where he couldn't go into certain parts of it was Rhodesia at the time, or you had to have a pass and things like that. Then that transitioned. Then they moved to Germany because of the education.
Yeah.
They got a scholarship to go there. They were one of the first of people of color to go there. So you're treated differently in a way. But once people get to know you in Germany, they're very lovely people as well.
Yeah.
Then it's all fine. But there's always that small minority who doesn't understand that it's just a color, it's just a different culture, but we're a whole human. But
Yeah.
he said one thing. He always said, so as a woman, and as a woman of color, you're going to have to work twice as hard, three times as hard to get as far. And you just think, oh, Dad, you're just saying that. I'm fine. But you notice it. I've sat in front of panels for interviews where everyone in front of me was a white male, and you sort of think, wow, the bias is already there. There used
Yeah.
to be a time where questions would be asked about, so what are your plans for family?
For
Why
family.
is that
Yeah.
important? When I had my first child and second child, I knew already I was going to be disadvantaged in terms of career progression because they'll be thinking, oh, well, she's got other priorities. And you sort of think, but I'm working, I was the one working on the weekends when the kids were asleep because I thought that's the only time I could finish the projects. And in the morning it would be done. And you're
Yeah.
not rewarded for that. It's just, oh, you're so hardworking, you're so valuable.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and Mel, I think the turning point for me was a few years ago to say, actually, if I'm not valued, I should go.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
hard.
Yes.
And I've
It's
only
really.
learned that in the last 10 years to say,
Yeah.
actually, if I'm not valued, I know my skill set, I know I can offer it, then I need to go to a place where I am. And if that
Yeah.
means moving, changing then the job or the role, then maybe that's what I need to do. But it's a very difficult transition because as a woman we're it's a good quality to have. We're multitaskers, but we're also nurturers. We're also thinking of security,
Yeah.
whereas probably our counterparts males are just, I speak to lots of guys who are like, why are you wasting time here, just go. I'm
Yeah.
like, what? How do you think that way?
All right, mate. I'll just move then. And also,
Yeah.
we don't have the opportunities. It's not like I've got 67,000 offers in my inbox from all of my
Yes,
friends
this
at,
is it.
Jennifer
That's
Lopez
it.
account. Like,
Yeah,
it's
we
not
don't have
like
a black book of connections because we didn't go to those universities. This is also another thing. If you don't have that, you can't just pick up and go. It needs to be very strategic. And to your point
job
about,
applications get you nowhere. So, really, like, how am I supposed to just go? I had this load. Oh, just leave.
yeah,
All right. I'll just leave where to
no, it's
where?
not easy at all. But like you said, I think we then now need to help, our sisters or our
Yes,
brothers
definitely.
coming up and say, right, I am going to be very clear with you. In my organization is very small and I have an amazing team, and a lot of them are young and want career progression.
Yes. Yeah.
But I've always had that open conversation with them to say, this team is not suddenly going to grow. But what we can do is we can empower you, we can inspire you, we can, allow you to, we won't micromanage you. I don't micromanage,
Yeah.
empower you to make decisions, give feedback, because these are skills that when you decide to spread your wings, they will help you elsewhere. And if that's one thing I can give, a 20-year-old or 25-year-old along the way, they don't know it now, but in 5 or 10 years' time, they will appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so to your point, it's good that we're talking about these things because I'm sure that they're still happening now.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
I'm sure that they are absolutely happening. I mean, we're growing I'm growing my sort of post sales function teams, and I speak with lots of women who have done some incredible things, and I'm like, where are you getting the time to do all this? And they're like, well, I'm just making time for it. And then I speak about salary expectations, and they tell me what salaries they're on, and I'm horrified because I just think,
mm,
somebody is taking you for, your employer is taking you for a ride. And it's so systemic and it's so endemic and it's so inherent in our business culture that nobody bats an eyelid, and it's a challenge really that I think, I work really hard to make sure I address with my team. You don't work twice as hard, you work just as hard. We all work hard. We all have a work-life balance. If something doesn't get done, let's have a conversation. Let's figure out when we can do it. My job is to help facilitate that and make sure that, that happens. And if I need to smooth some other stuff off in the other, with our clients or whatever, then that's my job,
And this is why representation matters. So you
Yeah,
being in that role is already opening for you to build a team that is all about character, attitude,
exactly.
resilience.
Yeah,
You're looking at
yeah,
people at first face value. You're very open. I think that is the reason why we need, more representation in the roles itself. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's really important. I wish that I'd had, not that I'm saying I'm the be all and end all, but I wish I'd have had somebody like me, maybe 6-7 years earlier that might have helped me to do something, maneuver maybe slightly more quickly or in a slightly different way or with slightly less work, amount of work that I needed to sort of put in to get here. So it's really important to me that, as I build my teams, I'm building a team that is representative, is diverse, is based on character, and that my job is to make sure that they come away from this role, because these roles are not for life. These roles are for 2-3 years, especially for the younger generations, that they leave this role thinking, "Oh, Melody was a good leader. She looked out for me as a leader, and she helped me to grow. And because of that, I now have this other skill set that I can now take away and develop with. And that's really important to me. And I spend quite a lot of my time doing that, making sure that those structures are in place. Mm.
That's amazing. Melody, let's talk about work-life balance, self-care, because those are like buzzwords now, and
Yeah,
buzzwords in a good way. Health and well-being is being embedded into a lot of businesses
yeah,
and
yeah.
cultures. What does that mean to you, and how do you find the time for yourself? Because I think it's also good for us to showcase that there's no one size fits all. Whatever stage you are in your life, that balance
Yeah,
may look different, or there may
yeah,
be no balance at that time.
yeah,
um,
yeah,
what does
exactly.
that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting. It's a really interesting question. I've been doing quite a bit of work on this in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, there have been periods of time in my career where there has been just no work life balance. Right, there has been too much to do, not enough people to do it, and external deadlines, and it's like, and you think,
And
well,
that's the reality.
and that's the reality of the situation. So in those circumstances, I think that's the resilience piece we spoke about earlier is what gets you through that. And you almost make a deal with yourself, don't you? Like, if you just do this and get this out the door in some draft format, if nothing else, then you can then actually we'll take a week off, or we'll take a break, or we'll do something else that is much more, much less stressful. So there have been quite prolonged periods of time where we have been under, where I've been under quite a bit of pressure. But I think more recently, and because I don't want to return to that, I have put in place other much harder stops. And again, I think this comes with age. I think it comes with experience. I think I'm lucky that I'm in a senior enough role where I can dictate my own hours a little bit, because there is an expectation that I'm always on call. I'm always the chief customer officer. I'm always here. But equally, there's an expectation that I will be offline maybe, at 5:30, 6, because I've gone to the gym. But then I might need to come back on when I come back. But um, I've really tried to put into place and they're stops. They're like your work day is whatever, 7:30, 8 in the morning till 5:30, 6, and that's it.
Mm.
Stop. Nothing good comes of frantically working every night. Nothing good, unless it's a condensed project. Prolonged stress like that is detrimental to your work, it's detrimental to you, it doesn't produce good results at all, then who benefits from it? Nobody. And then you experience burnout. And I've been there a couple of times. It's not pleasant, and it's a long old slog back to normality if you allow yourself to get into that cycle of, I don't have time to take a walk, I don't have time to eat my lunch, I don't have time for breakfast today, I really need the loo, but I don't have time to, I don't have time to go to the bathroom, which is next door. It's not great. And you do that for a few months, but actually it takes you a year to recover from it. It's not worth it. The trade-off is not worth it,
Yeah. There was a McKinsey report that said employees now have the unique opportunity to move the needle on burnout and explore ways to help workers struggling with mental health. Because ultimately, if you've got a workforce that is constantly running on empty, well, they will then move into, alcohol, drugs,
Then you've got bigger
you
problems, right?
yeah, overeating, obesity, problems in their marriage, in their
Yeah,
families, and
yeah,
ultimately that's what results in the be on and end all, which is death. So
yeah.
creating an environment where it's, if this is why technology is really good, and it just circles back to your role about automations and making life easier,
Yeah.
that will just take away maybe a lot of the stresses. Of course, there's always crunch time in businesses, whether it's
Mm,
deadlines. There's crunch time
absolutely.
in hospitals where there are more
Yes.
surgeries and more cases than that is always going to be there. I think
Yeah.
where I sometimes struggle is with this myth that there's a generation that thinks there's only the 4 hour day, or there's this, oh, I wake up and I do my exercise and then I only work for a few hours. I think we're still living in a world where there is the third world that is not developed, where
Yeah.
people still have to wake up at 4 a.m. and go and sell in the market,
Yeah. Yeah.
fetch water. The country where I come from, a lot of people are entrepreneurs by choice because there are lots of graduates, but there are no jobs. So you're forced to be a hustler. And
Yeah.
hustling means, from morning to evening, you're thinking about where your next paycheck is coming from. So
Yeah.
it's just like you said, finding those moments. I think self-care and health and well-being means just treating people with dignity as human beings,
Yeah. And
like
as an employer,
at a basic level. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. As an employer and as somebody that has sat, in fairly senior roles over the last 5, 6 years, um, again, my job is to make sure that we have those things in place so that when my team is struggling, they've got a personal commitment, they're just knackered because we've
Yeah.
done, or we haven't done something big, but because life is exhausting,
Life happens,
life
basically. Yeah.
happens. It's tiring. And, I've definitely woken up some days and gone, I am really tired. I've got no real reason. It's not like I've had a late night or particularly stressful week, but I'm just exhausted, giving people the freedom to wax and wane with that, and so that they can then work to their strengths is such an important element of business resilience. If you burn your team out, they leave, and then you have no team,
Yeah.
and then you have even more pressure,
Yeah.
because the people you bring on are then doubly loaded. So it's selfish from it's savvy business sense to make sure your team are
Yeah.
taken care of, and that you are taken care of, as well, that you also take care of yourself. And I also do think that as you get older, your tolerance for those long late nights and it's a little bit of that working twice as hard for half the reward. You're a bit like,
Yeah.
no, actually, I've done that. I don't need to do that anymore as well. So
Yeah.
that's always helpful.
Talk to me about your circle. How important is your circle to you, your relationships? Obviously I've met you through our gym, a lovely CrossFit gym. Shout out to Gym Club. But it's interesting, isn't it, how building those external relationships are really important. Talk to me about
Yeah,
your close circle and what drives you from a
yeah,
personal perspective.
it's really yeah, it's a really good question. Your circles change, don't they? I mean, the circle that I had in my 20s is not the circle that I have that I have now. Some of them have come with me, and loosely, they're still there. But my inner team, my champions, my cheerleaders, my therapists, my shoulders to cry on, my feeding me tequila on a Friday, all of those people. They are, it's not an understatement to say they've probably saved my life, on occasion over the last 10 years. Because and equally me with them, I am lucky that I have a circle of very high-powered women in very senior jobs doing very similar activities to me, who are also working long, late hours sometimes, who are also a bit overwhelmed with what's going on. And frankly, sometimes we're all winging it and we just need to tell someone that we don't know what we're doing and we're winging it. And for someone to go, it's all right, I'm winging it as well. That late night Google thing, isn't it? But having that circle is a game changer. And there are different variations of the circle, but having those people around you is your comfort, is your padding, is the way that you make sure that you don't go insane, because it's a very lonely place when you're in these positions. I find, the higher up the hierarchy, the perceived hierarchy. I mean, we're all roll your sleeves up, get the job done at the end of the day. But the higher up the perceived hierarchy, the less camaraderie you have with your colleagues. I think you operate with different people who don't have time to gossip, who don't have time to decompress at the end of every day, who don't have time to dissect a call other than a really quick debrief or whatever. So you rely then on your extended circle to fill that for you. And it's interesting, as you get older, I found that it's more difficult to find friends, to bring into that circle. So my friends tend to be that circle is they're older friends I've brought along with me. But I have accrued people from work, people that I've worked with over the years that have been fun, that have been allies, that have been confidants, that I still talk to every day and still go to with a challenge, And I might not tell them my innermost personal secrets, but I will almost certainly call them if I have a professional problem or challenge that I need to navigate, So they serve different purposes, don't they? And I don't
Serving
know if you
different
have the
purposes,
same.
like you said. Yeah, I think that's it. Having those, you need those sprinkles to go out for drinks with. You need those
Yeah,
sprinkles to talk about your, personal relationship issues. You need those sprinkles to say, this is just, I had that meeting. Have you had that experience as well? And that shows, growth as well, that you are able to, they say, look at your circle and it tells you a lot about you.
yes,
So if you got a
yes,
lot of fools in your circle, you need to
yeah,
change that circle. So it's
yes,
it's
yes.
important to say that it's not going to be the same, that it's going to be evolved.
Yeah, it is about, I'm sure you've had similar experiences. You work with people or you encounter people and you look at their people and you think, oh, actually, none of your values align with mine. This is not a circle that I want to be involved with, except that in a professional context, I need to be. And they're sort of few and far between, but it does happen. But I think that's a sign of growth, isn't it? And that's a sign of you understanding who you are, what your values are, where your moral guidance, your moral compass is. And then you apply that both professionally and personally, and you can say, well, actually, you guys don't really align with me, so I'll deal with you because I need to, but actually I have no interest in collecting you as one of my very many circles.
Yeah.
Whereas other
What are
people,
your values, Mel? What are your values? And yeah.
really good question. In this, yeah, my core values. I think integrity is probably one of my biggest values. I work with integrity. I think I administer my friendships with integrity. It's really key. In my experience, if you don't work with that as a foundation, things fail. If you don't have integrity, it's not successful. And that could be a business transaction, it could be a personal friendship or a professional friendship. If you're not sort of acting with integrity. I think the second one is honesty. So I'm a real big believer in transparency. I don't believe in keeping secrets, like, if something's not going great at work, it's better to get the team around the table and say, not going great, what can we do to solve the challenge? More heads is better than me by myself worrying about it. So honesty in that sort of professional context, for sure. And I think they're probably my two, I have other sort of core things about making sure that I'm always sort of good-natured and the sense of humour. The things that you put on, not that I've ever had a Tinder profile, but the Tinder profile things, they're always there and hilarious. I've never done
Your character, basically, the
yeah,
things
the
that bring
character
with you.
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. How about you? What are your sort of core values?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they've like evolved over time.
Yeah,
I think for me, definitely integrity, honesty, loyalty.
yeah,
Uh, I think over time, perseverance and just showing up
yeah,
has been a
yeah,
very big one for me.
yeah,
And I think also being true to myself is a very big one. That's just come up with just being 42. I think that really matters because I
yeah,
always think if I'm lying on my deathbed today, will I be thinking about these things that were bothering me this morning? And
yeah.
if it's not worth it, then I need to find a way to do things that add value to me as well as a person, you know.
That's
Um,
a really interesting one.
yeah,
And actually, we're similar ages, and I've also been grappling with that sort of same thing. I'm not grappling with my own mortality, but that sort of what is important. What are the important things? And then if it's not, and then so then if it doesn't make the shortlist, then why am I worried about it? And
exactly.
sometimes work does come into that.
Mm,
I want to make sure that we do a great job, and I work very hard for both my team and our customers and our clients and our growth story and the company's well-being and success, and I will worry about it to an extent, but in sort of previous iterations of my career, I've spent nights up
yeah.
worrying about it, and I've let it make me anxious, and I've let it ruin my appetite unbelievably. Like, it takes so much for it to ruin anything, to ruin my appetite. But actually, as I sort of move through the years, I'm a bit like, well, it's not worth it, because actually the worry is obsolete. It doesn't actually solve the problem. All it does is
Mm.
make you more tired and less able to tackle the issue. And sometimes it's out of your hands, right? Sometimes you're worrying about something, you're like, I
That
can't
you
do
can't
anything about it.
control. Yeah. There'll be a lot of instances, I think, where whether it's personal, the trying one, especially when you have kids, there are situations you cannot control, and that's the biggest
Yeah.
learning. You're like, oh
Yeah.
goodness, karma. What a lesson here that I need to learn. And sometimes you just have to let go and let the situation unfold and see what happens. But yeah,
Yeah.
a big one
Yeah.
there. Trailblazer takeaways. We've talked about a lot of things. We've inspired. I think we've probably allowed people to question the situation they're in. But if there were 3 or 4 things you'd love to share as a takeaway tip for some
Yeah.
young lady out there, what would it be?
Yeah, so again, I've been thinking about this a little bit. So I once heard this really lovely phrase that said, "Radical change requires radical action," and I loved it because for me, I could apply that to full scale revolution, or I could apply it to the micro, which was actually advocate for yourself. Ask for the pay rise, because if you don't, they're not going to give it. If they're not going to give it to you. um, Pitch your idea to the people around you, to the investors. That's your radical change. If you want that radical change, if you want the pay rise, if you want the promotion, if you want to set up your own business, you have to do that radical action. And that radical action doesn't mean, staging a coup. It might mean I don't ever advocate that, just so we're clear, before we broadcast this out to the world. But that radical action is your version of radical
Mm.
action, whatever that is. So that's that, and I think about that a lot when I'm umming and ahhing about something that feels uncomfortable to me. I'm like, but if you want this change, you have to do this thing. And if you do it and it doesn't get you to where you want to be, at least that's an answer. So then it's a step forward, and then you can adjust or evolve or change tact, or take a left turn instead of a right. So that was my first one. My second one, and we've talked about this just shortly before, is about finding your people. So they can be inside your organisation, so your professional internal allies, the people that are going to champion you, advocate for you, sometimes protect you because that's just the nature of business. And they're also your personal people. They're the people that, when you're having a tough day, that you can help decompress. They can help you decompress or take your mind off things or give you advice. Find them and use them and keep them close to you. They're so important. The third thing was about not compromising your values for money or for your job, because it's not worth it, because what you will end up doing is the two things will jar against each other every day, like tectonic plates. You'll never quite be at ease. And people really do go in for the pursuit of money and job titles, they really do. And I'm probably guilty of that a little bit as well. But it means sometimes you compromise your sort of morals and your values. And that's it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable place to be. And then the last one, and we talked about this earlier, right? Don't compare yourself to other people's journeys. It's yours. It's yours. It's your path. We're here for such a fleeting time. If you spend your time worrying about what other people are accomplishing, achieving, it's just disheartening, because there's always somebody better than you. There's always somebody who's younger, who's done more. But you have no idea how they've got there. You don't know if their parents own the company that they're working for, or, their godparent is a A-list celebrity. You have no idea. So, don't compare yourself. It's you. It's your journey. You do you, I think, is probably my final takeaway.
And that's a very good one to end on, because that is the whole purpose of the podcast, to showcase people and their journeys, women especially. Everyone's journey is different. And I think it's been eye-opening. I mean, the fact that you're now in the technology sector, having had a different career path, but you're passionate about problem solving, about teams making change, is really what has got you to where you are. So, Melody, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast, where we hope to inspire young women out there. And I've learned a lot, and I need to go back to my drawing board and say, oh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always lovely, isn't it, to talk about these things. And I think it's really great that you're doing this, because, again, this was not available to me growing up. I didn't hear women who are not white, who are Iranian, like moving through their careers in the way that I have, and or in their careers in any way, actually, because podcast, none of that stuff really existed. So it's really nice. I think it's a really valuable thing that you're putting this out there, right? So women can find it, and and men, anybody who's embarking on their career journey. So thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Brilliant. So, Melody, this has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. For everyone listening, please remember to tell another woman about the podcast, to subscribe, like, share, follow. We can only bring amazing women guests on here if we continue to tell other, word of mouth is a thing. It's still a thing. And looking forward to you commenting, and you can DM us if you have any further questions, etc. We're here to empower, to inspire. Thank you.